Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging. Apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Thank you for joining me today here on Point of View. We're going to be covering a lot of different stories. The first half hour here, we're going to be talking with Jimmy Wayne, and you are most likely familiar with some of his music and his new book out, Walk to Beautiful. Then we're going to be talking in the last half of this first hour about the story of Brittany Maynard, who said that she is going to kill herself on November 1st because she has brain cancer. We're going to hear from Tippetts about that. I think she has written an outstanding sort of open letter, so we'll get into some very serious topics in this first hour. And then in the second hour, we'll come back to a topic that we've addressed before with Tim Elmore, 12 Huge Mistakes Parents Can Avoid. Lots of things to cover today, but let's get to our first interview, and that's with Jimmy Wayne, a former foster kid, as well as an individual best known for his great music, and perhaps you are familiar with the song that was number one, Do You Believe Me Now? But what we're also going to be talking about, in addition to his incredible testimony, is his desire, back a number of years ago, to walk halfway across America from Nashville to Phoenix to really highlight a concern about the issue of kids that age out of the foster system and become homeless. He's also an author of Paper Angels, this book, Walk to Beautiful, and of course has been a national spokesperson for court-appointed special advocates. Jimmy Wayne, thank you so very much for being with us today here on Point of View.
Thank you so much for having me.
You know, anybody that's heard your story just is amazed that you are where you are. And I think for at least a few minutes, if you wouldn't mind, I know you've told the story many times before. You tell it so well in the book, and it is co-authored with Ken Abraham. But I thought it would be good for some of our listeners that do not know some of your background to have you share a little bit about where your life was going with a bipolar mother, how people like B and Russell Costner stepped in and kind of changed your life.
Absolutely. This book, Walk to Beautiful, is my story, but it's also the story of hundreds of thousands of children growing up in the system today.
Yes.
It's about growing up in the foster care system, ended up homeless, couch surfing, ended up homeless again, moving around from home to group home to foster care, detention center, moving around as a kid. And talks about being rescued when I was homeless and 16 years old, taken in by an elderly couple in their mid-70s, given an opportunity to go to school, go to college, provided the resources so that I could pursue my dream and catch it. And then it talks about having some success in the music business. And instead of, it just talks about taking that success and all of that experience and giving it back through a walk that I did in 2010, where I walked from Nashville, Tennessee to Phoenix, Arizona, 1,700 miles every step of the way, sharing the message. Speaking up for these kids that have a voice but don't have a platform to speak from. I feel like that God's given me this gift of experience and the opportunity to perform on Madison Square Garden, to be able to plant those seeds and say, help a kid, just help them, do something to help them.
It's an incredible book. Let's, if we can, for just a minute, maybe talk about what you dealt with in your kind of preteen and teen years, because as I mentioned in passing, the struggles of before you were kicked out, which is, again, just incredible what happened there. A mother that put you through a lot that most of our listeners probably cannot relate to, although I suspect some can. And it caused you up until that point in time to be angry, to act out, And as I said before, if it wasn't for being Russell Costner, I think your trajectory, or where you are today, would be very different than where you've ended up.
Yeah, I was never I was not a troublemaker. I didn't get into any criminal activity or anything. I was just an angry kid who, was a small kid, and I was afraid, and I hung out by myself. I struggled with my relationship with God, and I knew there was a God, and I was always asking, where are you? Why am I going through this? If you're really that God who cares the way they say you do, then why am I hungry? Why am I living on the street? Why am I going up to someone asking them for food? And why is the stepdad abusing us? Why is mom leaving me at the parking lot in the middle of the night? So I was really angry, but it wasn't until this family in their mid-70s took me in when I was 16 years young with long hair and tattoos, beat completely down, just filthy kid looking for a job to make a little money to buy some food. They, despite the way I looked on the outside, allowed me to work around their house and then offered me a room in their house and allowed me to stay in their house for 6 years, turned my life completely around, and through them I experienced so much love that it outweighed any amount of pain that I've ever experienced, and to help me find my way. And that's why I'm where I'm at today, because of that family who was 75 years old and 79 years old. I was 16. They single-handedly did that for me.
And I might just mention that in the book you've got pictures of them, the house where you were, the graduation from high school, and a lot more. Let me just mention that for just a minute before we take a break, and that is we do have a copy of the book available, and we have a couple of things that you can do. First of all, we have a very good article that is a nice summary of the book in our article section. Then we have a link to jimmywayne.com, and that will certainly give you a chance to find out more about the book. It is published by Thomas Nelson, and you probably can find it in your local bookstore, but if not, you can certainly get it from his website. We have it available on ours, about 370 pages. And Jimmy, let's just talk about some of the resources on your website, because I think people that already are familiar with you maybe have never taken the time to go and to learn a little bit more about your music, but also to learn about some of the things that they can do to help those young boys and girls that are in the foster care system that when they reach a certain age are basically kicked out. And once they age out of the foster care system, a lot of them out there on the streets, aren't they?
That's right. 50% of the females end up pregnant within the first year.
Wow.
It's an epidemic. The 1 out of 4 within 2 years ends up in jail. And we're dealing with this epidemic right here in our country, and for some reason, we're not talking about it enough. We're not doing enough to help these kids. Just like Congressman Cooper, and the representative in Tennessee, said, if every church in the state of Tennessee would identify one loving family in that church who would then go and help one kid in the foster care system in the state of Tennessee, we could solve the problem.
Good line. I need to take a break. When we come back, we'll talk a little bit more about some of these issues. And in the first half hour, we do have Jimmy Wayne. So if you'd like to join our conversation about his music or about homelessness and the foster care system, we'd love to hear from you. A little bit later this hour, we're going to move on to another topic, but we wanted you to know about this new book. It is just out, Jimmy Wayne with Ken Abraham, and it is entitled Walk to Beautiful, The Power of Love and a Homeless Kid Who Found the Way. And a good portion of it is his own testimony. A good portion of it as well is also this incredible walk halfway across the country from Nashville to Phoenix, really trying to highlight one of the great concerns we'll talk about today, and that is how children can age out of the foster care system. They end out on the streets. What happens to them next? We'll talk about that with Jimmy Wayne right after this.
The Point of View Commentary with Kerby Anderson.
As we're getting closer to the open enrollment period for Obamacare, it might be good to go back and evaluate the claims made during the debate on the Affordable Care Act. We were told that the costs would go down, competition would increase, millions would enroll, and policies wouldn't be canceled. Robert Moffat, writing in the Daily Signal, says that healthcare costs have increased significantly. Huge increases in deductibles and policies sold through the exchanges were a big story in Florida, Illinois, and elsewhere. The promise made during the congressional debate was that premium costs would drop by $2,500. They increased dramatically and even doubled for many Americans, especially of younger age. Robert Moffat also explains that the law actually reduced competition in many health insurance markets. A limited analysis of the Kaiser Family Foundation found that in 2014, large states like California and New York were more competitive, but Connecticut and Washington were less competitive. Another study found that on the county level, more than half had just one or two health insurance carriers. The Obama administration claims that over 8 million people enrolled in the health insurance exchanges, but we should remember that exchange enrollment is not the same as insurance coverage, and there are 700,000 fewer persons in the exchanges than previously thought. Americans were also promised that Obamacare would stop health insurers from canceling policies. Merrill Matthews, writing in Forbes, reminds us that more health insurance policies have been canceled under Obamacare than ever before. He goes on to explain that more cancellations are on the way. The president twice postponed the deadline to have Obamacare qualified coverage in the small group and individual markets, but only if states wanted to extend the deadline. Some did and some did not. More cancellations are coming, but the notices will emerge in drips and drabs and likely won't get as many headlines. I think it's safe to say that Obamacare hasn't lived up to any of the promises made when the bill was being debated. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Jimmy Wayne with us for a few more minutes, a musician, songwriter, and if you'd like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. New book out, Walk to Beautiful, and one of the things it highlights is that 1,700-mile walk from Nashville to Phoenix to raise awareness for at-risk youth that are in the foster care system and age out of it. Might also point out that, as you said, you did get your degrees, and one of those was in criminal justice. You ended up working upon graduation at the North Carolina Department of Corrections in Dallas, North Carolina. I've heard you say before that the joke is that was a natural step because I knew a lot of the inmates, and you've got a picture at least of one of those in your book.
I did. I grew up in the system and grew up around a lot of these guys who inevitably ended up becoming prisoners because of, their own decisions. And a lot of them had the same opportunity I had, but chose to take a different route, if you will. And, I chose to take a better route. And it worked for me. I ended up working at the prison, monitoring those guys, and I did not feel sorry for them whatsoever.
Yeah, and of course, they're on the other side of the bars, but it brings me back to the other point you made, and that is, what is happening to those individuals that age out of the system? You talked about what happened to the females, 50% become pregnant. What about the men? I mean, I think some of them end up in those departments of corrections, don't they?
80% of our convicts were recipients of the system when they were kids. That's what happens to them. It's what happened to Billy the Kid. If we go as far back as the orphan train era, we'll learn that, this has been an epidemic in this country since the 1800s, when the orphan train used to transfer kids. They would take kids right there in New York City, put them on a train. These kids had no families, no moms and dads, maybe a brother or sister. Put them in a cart, travel west, dropping these kids off at depots left and right. Ranchers would come up and pinch their arm to see how fat and muscular they are or whatever and see if they could work on their property. That's a form of slavery. That's what they did to these kids. And Billy the Kid happened to be one of those kids, inevitably ended up, to the point of ended up killing somebody.
That's right.
Well, we don't hear about the front end, we hear about the back end.
That's why I want to talk about this for just a minute, because, we certainly do talk oftentimes about the back end in the sense of the prison system. We have had, of course, people on over the years that work with Bill Glass. They work with Prison Fellowship, and we can go through the long list there. But sometimes there's real value, Jimmy, in a sense, going upstream and looking at what led to that. And homelessness, corruption in the system, fatherlessness. There are some very important indicators that say that if we don't address some of those issues in the family or in our government institutions, we're going to continue having more and more young people and even middle-aged people ending up in the prison system.
That's exactly right. We have to start with the foundation, because the bottom holds up the top. And if we're trying to nip it in the bud when it's at the top, it's not going to work. We need to make sure we take care of the kids right now. And even from a biblical standpoint, it's not a well, if I want to do it or not. It's a demand. We are supposed to care for the orphans and widows in their time of distress. What does that mean? That means a kid without parents, a kid without a dad, a kid who's distressed, who's hungry, who's hurting, who's abused and neglected. They're right here in this country. We're supposed to take care of all kids all over the world, but man, these kids are part of that group. So we have to take care of these kids right here. It doesn't mean we necessarily have to move. Whatever our resources is, mine is singing and writing songs. So I write songs that help them, that help raise money for organizations that are proactively getting involved in their life. I mean, doing something. Even if you cut hair, just go down into the facility and donate an hour of your time, cut their hair, because they don't have the money to do that. Right. Just do something.
Do something. And I like what you said just a minute ago. Sometimes these problems look so large. I've used this example when we've talked about welfare. If each church in America adopted so many people under the poverty line, we wouldn't even need the Department of Health and Human Services. You use the example from Tennessee, which is a good one. If each church in Tennessee, you look at the number of churches in Tennessee, you look at the number in the foster care system, is almost a perfect one-to-one match. So if each church just had one couple, a lot of these problems start going away. And what we need, I think, are more and Russell Costner's out there, even before the church gets involved, to just say, there's somebody that has a need. I need to step out, and you're a living testimony to what happened when the Costner said, we'll get involved in Jimmy Wayne's life.
Well, we can beat up the government, we can beat up the church, and we know that's not, I know firsthand that's not going to help. It just makes them mad. I've already been down that road. I've been told by the church, several churches, you're just going to run us off, and it's frustrating because it's a business. And it's like, if I can't pay a tithe, then I'm not important to your congregation. These kids can't pay a tithe. They can't vote. They can't do anything for you. They can't give you anything. They have nothing to give you. So they don't mean anything to you. But through this book, I'm just trying to show people that, hey, you know what? With a little bit of love, you can change a kid's life forever. And by doing that, you never know what this kid's going to grow up to become. Hey, who would have ever thought I would be standing on stage at Madison Square Garden singing my songs?
Amazing to me.
Yeah, it's unbelievable.
It is. Let's just, before we run out of time here, talk about what people can do maybe through your website. I mean, they may not want to walk 1,700 miles, and after reading your story about breaking a bone in your foot and still walking on it, which is an incredible story itself, they might want to do something. And I'm sure a lot of people right now are saying, okay, I'm in. What can I do? What can I support? Where can I send some money? Those kinds of things. Help us out.
Start with reading this book. This book is my life story. This book is our story. Read this book. This book will give you an insight to what is going on with these children, what they're going through, how to deal with them, the people that's dealing with them, and how much pressure is on them, like the social workers who are overworked and underpaid. I mean, the burnout. I mean, it will give you a whole new perspective of this kid that we we think that is a criminal, that's bad, and all this other stuff. No, it's going to give you a whole new perspective of this kid and how you can get involved and help that kid by utilizing your resources, every resource that you have. Start with the book, Walk to Beautiful. Read it. Start with the cover. Don't go to after the prologue. Go start with a cover and read from there to the end.
370 pages. It is published by Thomas Nelson. Jimmy Wayne has been with us. He co-authored it with Ken Abraham, and it is entitled Walk to Beautiful, The Power of Love and the Homeless Kid Who Found the Way. We have an article about it in our article section. We have a link to Jimmy Wayne's website, jimmywayne.com, and we also encourage you to look for it in your local bookstore. If not, we make it available to you as well. And so, Jimmy, I appreciate you not only writing the book, but being so vulnerable in the book and spending some time today with us to share your story and to challenge us to do something to help those young people which are aging out of the foster care system, becoming homeless, and need someone to step into their lives and help them out. So thank you so very much for being that advocate for that very important issue.
Absolutely, and thank you for having me on. Thank you.
We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to get into some other very important issues today, and one of those has to do with a young woman that is convinced that the best answer to her problem, that is cancer, especially brain cancer, is on November 1st, take a pill and kill herself. And we think that there is a different perspective that needs to be heard. So that's why we're going to have a chance to hear from Kara Tippetts in just a minute. She is the author of the book, The Hardest Piece, but also we have one of her open letters that you might want to read. And I certainly think that this is going to be helpful to you as well. So again, all of the information related to some of our conversations today are on the website. All three of the books we're going to mention are there. The articles are there. The web links are there. We also, I forgot to mention, do have a Jimmy Wayne video that you can watch real quickly. But most importantly, we're really just 2 weeks away from an election. Matter of fact, for many of you, early voting started today. So it's an opportunity for you to cast that intelligent vote. And the way to cast an intelligent vote is to make sure that you have access to some of our election resources. So on our website, pointofview.net, you will see as you click on that button in the middle that we have voter guides. We have books, we have articles, we have videos, we have audio material, we have the resource documents. We have a way for you to check and make sure that you're registered to vote and to find out all sorts of basic information about the election. And we include so many different websites because each one of them and each one of the voter guides has a different look at different cases, and some of them are voter guides, some of them are surveys. And so we encourage you to get as much information as you possibly can so that you can make an intelligent decision about what indeed is going to be taking place in just a little over 2 weeks. We need to take a break, and when we come back, we'll continue our conversation, this time talking with Kara Tippetts. All that coming up right after this.
It is amazing what you can learn listening to our leaders today. I mean, who would have known that the Islamic State wasn't Islamic? Seriously, where will you hear the truth with a capital T about Islam? Where will you find a reasoned and faithful response to attacks on the Bible and God's design for human flourishing? Here's one answer. Kerby and the team at Point of View. The difference is that we don't have access to taxpayer dollars, and we're not funded by major corporate partners. What we do have is partners like you. Now let me challenge you. Become a Century partner. That's $100 a month, or perhaps $1 a day, $30 a month. We have gifts to thank you depending on the level of your partnership. Learn more online using the partner button at pointofview.net, or write Point of View, Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221, or call us. Say you want to be a partner. 800-227-1444. Will you be the next Century partner? $100 monthly. Pray about it. Or $1 a day. We really need your help. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
No doubt you're familiar with the story. If not, we're going to certainly spend some time talking about it, about Brittany Maynard, age 29, who is scheduled to die November 1st. At least that's what she believes she needs to do after dealing with the issue of a brain tumor and cancer, and not wanting to go through the pain and suffering that would inevitably take place. We thought that this would be a very important topic to address, but I found that maybe the best way to address it is to have someone who can understand that only so well, because she has also traveled a similar route, and that is Kara Tippetts, who is the mother of 4 children, and her husband were involved in planting a church in Colorado Springs, and thought that they were going to come there in a sense of strength, but found that in some respects they've had to depend upon the Lord, as she really began to understand what that meant a number of years ago when she was diagnosed with cancer. You can find out a little bit more about her. We have posted her Dear Brittany letter on our website, and that's in the article section. We also have her book, The Hardest Piece, which is in our Point of View library. And, of course, you can also go to her blog, mundanefaithfulness.com. So, Kara, thank you for joining us today here on Point of View.
Thanks so much for having me.
We're going to really, in a sense, talk about 2 things. I can see some of my callers want to address the broader issue of physician-assisted suicide, which certainly we will get to in a few minutes. But take us through your own travel and your own experience, because so much of that comes out in your open letter to Brittany.
Yeah. 2 years ago, at the age of 36, I was diagnosed with stage 2B cancer. And we took an aggressive route through chemo, double mastectomy, and radiation. And in the fall of 2013, we were just being aggressive and decided to have my ovaries removed. We'd had 4 kids and decided we just wanted to be really aggressive because of my cancer. And when they went in to remove my ovaries, I had cancer all through my reproductive system. And it has since moved to my lymph system, my bones, as well as my brain. And it's just been this journey and that's when I started really writing about if God is going to ask me to travel this hard path, I'm going to trust Him to walk with me. And so my writing has been over the last 2.5 years of just pointing out the places that God has shown up for me in my life.
And you are an incredible writer. By the way, I just do encourage everyone to take the time, at the very least, to read the Dear Brittany letter. You'll get a real understanding of what Kara is able to do in terms of her writing. Of course, you can go to her website, and we have links to that as well. And, of course, the book, The Hardest Place. And I guess what would you say, I guess I'll let everybody read your entire letter, but what would you say to somebody like Brittany, who is now traveling that same road, but says, I just go to Oregon. It's physician-assisted suicide is legal there. Take a pill, and I'll end my life November 1st.
I spent the first half of the letter telling her that I'm sorry that she's having to receive this hard story. I'm sorry for her brokenness, for her pain. Cancer is a very debilitating and awful disease to have to walk through. But then I spent the second half asking her not to do it, and asking, I think the best part of our culture is how we care for the tender and the broken and the vulnerable in our society. And, what's happening around this letter and her saying she's, so many people didn't even realize we have assisted suicide in states before her letter, before her video that she did with CNN. But what I really see in it and have asked is, as a community, we need to be caring for these broken, these disenfranchised, the vulnerable, the elderly in our society. And so often people choose assisted suicide because they don't want to be a burden, and they can't see the beauty in brokenness, because we live in such an independent society that having it all together and being strong is winning. But I just challenge Brittany and our community at large to look at brokenness as being beautiful.
I've written on this for many years. Whenever I write ethics books, and I've written a number now and revised others, we always talk about euthanasia, physician-assisted suicide. And over the years, I've seen Kara, for example, the former governor of Colorado at one point. Richard Lamb saying, well, people have a duty to die, like leaves on the tree. They need to sort of get out of the way. We've told stories about individuals in hospice care and in hospitals and in oncology wards apologizing that they're still alive and like you said, not wanting to be a burden. We've talked with people like Johnny Erickson Tada, who actually, if she had access to physician-assisted suicide when she broke her neck, probably would have ended her life. And I always ask the question of people when I speak in front of those groups, would the body of Christ and the Christian church have lost a blessing if Johnny Erickson Todd had killed herself years ago? I think we all know the answers to that. And I'm not trying to be cavalier about pain. That's why I'm wanting so much to have somebody who is a fellow traveler to speak truth and authenticity into this story. But it is something that we as believers need to really address. And what you are talking about is the need for us to understand that we are in a fallen world, that also that the church has a responsibility to reach out to those that cannot care for themselves, and those are the widows, the orphans, and the poor. And we talked about a little bit in our first half hour of this broadcast, and now in the second half an hour we're talking about it again. And so this is something that we don't necessarily train. And I don't know if your husband, Jason, was trained in seminary about that, but I think pastors and church leaders need to be on the forefront of saying we need to be a little less independent. We need to have more of a community. We need to reach out to those who are dying and those who are struggling with pain and suffering.
Absolutely. And I would say our church plant, we started our church in the midst of battling cancer. And in our church plant, there are 7 of us with cancer. And it's built this really beautiful community of we can't pretend to have it together because we're broken. And we show up on Sunday knowing we're needy and we need Jesus. And it has created this really beautiful, broken community that I would have never imagined. And it has been such a gift to my heart to have the place that I go to on Sunday to be the safe place that captures my broken heart, that reminds me of Jesus, and points me to my true need for healing from Him in eternity. And I won't see it here on earth. I mean, I could. God is able. I don't want to say that. I'll upset somebody. But that knowing Him is ultimately my healing. And that I'm cared for. The community, we long for suffering to be like a pregnancy, to end after 9 months and have something to show for it. Look at this lesson I learned from my suffering. But my story keeps going. Cancer keeps spreading, yes. And my community keeps meeting me. What new things do you need now? How can we support you now? They're not walking away. They're walking towards us, and it's really lovely.
Wonderful. Let's take some phone calls. 1-800-351-1212. We'll head out to Rhode Island, WARV. Raymond, thank you for joining us today here on Point of View.
Well, thank you. And thank you, ma'am, for speaking on behalf of life for all of us. I had the good fortune last night and a little bit before that to talk with a couple of physicians who were talking about the changes which are taking place now in medicine. And they said to me that in the days before Hippocrates, before the Hippocratic Oath, physicians used to enter a room with a vial, the contents of which were unknown to the patient.
Yes. The
patient didn't know whether it was a remedy or whether it was poison. And of course, not only on CNN, but in the newspapers and on the cover of People magazine this week, and on 60 Minutes last night, the featured story on 60 Minutes last night, people are talking about this. And this has not gone unnoticed by the medical community. I think it was the 12th of May edition of a National Review, which featured an expose having to do with the Massachusetts General Hospital.
I did see that, yeah.
Since 2006,
amazing.
The Massachusetts General Hospital has unilaterally and against the wishes of patients and their families and without their knowledge and consent, gave a do not resuscitate order on behalf of the patients there at Massachusetts General Hospital. I hope some lawyers are listening to this, and some lawyers for the patients and lawyers for the families of the patients who are no longer with us, because I think this is unconscionable, and I'd like to think it's illegal But it's thank you though for speaking up on behalf of life for all of us.
Yeah.
Appreciate that. Go ahead. I need to take a break, but real quick comment.
Yeah, I've seen my doctors in tears over this. That it breaks trust, and they said if it is legislated, how will patients know that they can be trusted or that their doctor's advocating for life or for death? It's very hard.
Certainly. We've seen that in the Netherlands, too, ever since they've had an essentially de facto physician-assisted suicide. I've documented in my most recent book how many individuals are put to death without their permission, and all sorts of issues that are surfacing, which we'll talk about after these important messages, and we will continue with Kara Tippetts. We'll be right back.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back for a few more minutes. If you'd like to join us, 1-800-351-1212. We'll get to some of those phone calls in just a minute. Kara Tippetts with us, and again, I might also send you to her website. We have a link for that, mundanefaithfulness.com. Of course, we also have information about her book, The Hardest Peace, and this open letter that she has written to Brittany Maynard. And just before we went to the break, Raymond was talking about how this has changed the medical profession. I mean, one of the reasons you had the Hippocratic Oath that was developed by the Greeks, by Hippocrates himself, was to prevent a few things that happen now. One is there in the Hippocratic Oath, I will not give a woman a pessary to produce an abortion. Well, they got rid of that after 1973 when abortion became legal. And then shortly thereafter, they also got rid of it because it says I will not give an individual strong drink in order to hasten death. And so these ideas that were so much a part of the medical profession and part of the Hippocratic Oath have been jettisoned, because now we have kind of the mindset that, well, an obstetrician can go in to try to save an unborn baby, but some abortionists would want to kill that unborn baby if it was the mother's wishes. Likewise, we have individuals trying to save people from cancer or from dementia or from a variety of other issues or health issues or maybe even a stroke. And then others that simply say, no, maybe it's time to pull the plug. And so we have moved from a time in which we always saw the doctor as part of the healing professions now to that sort of uncertainty that Raymond was talking about just a minute ago. And I'm sure as you've talked with some of your doctors, they're a little bit horrified by what has happened in their own medical profession.
Absolutely. People of faith and not of faith. I mean, people who share my beliefs and don't. They, as medical professionals, they feel committed to the health and well-being of their patients. And really, I think my neurosurgeon last week, he was just heartbroken over this. And then I have a friend who's a palliative care doctor who's passionate. He's passionate about keeping people comfortable in their dying. And he said, it's my art. I love it.
That's true.
Love to see people comfortable as they are enjoying their last breaths. And that's one thing Brittany put out another a video last week, and in the video you see somebody who's able to speak and cry, and I think, Brittany, you still have good moments. There will be bad days, and I know for some people they cannot understand, why would you ask somebody to go through suffering? Because there's something beautiful that's going to happen in my family, in my community, as they walk with me through those last days. Something beautiful in their story, empathy, compassion, care is going to grow as they carry me to my last breath.
Well, and again, this is sometimes seen as a hard case, but it opens the door to some very unlikely but most likely predictable solutions and scenarios. And one example is, over the years, I've cataloged a number of these cases. And I know, for example, the first woman to go to Oregon and use physician-assisted suicide was so healthy that she played a game of tennis the day before she decided to kill herself. We have, of course, some incredible examples from the Netherlands, and one that I use about this 20-year-old who began to get arthritis in her toes. Since she was a ballerina, she said, well, I can no longer dance. I'm just going to go, and did go and have herself put to death because she couldn't imagine a life without being able to dance as a ballerina. I mean, we sit here, Kara, and shake our heads of that kind of mindset, but that comes from a society that no longer believes in the sanctity of human life, because you're created in the image of God and have value and dignity. We've now moved to this idea where we evaluate your quality of life. And if a hospital or a future death panel decides your quality of life is not good enough, then we'll withhold treatment. But we're also saying you have patient autonomy, and if you think your quality of life is not good enough and you can convince a doctor to put you to death, you can now go to at least one state in one of the 50 states, and I suspect it's coming to others, in which you can have yourself put to death. And that's certainly not a biblical message, is it?
It's not. And, that's just the heartbreak of it. And Brittany, in the second video, said that she is being a mouthpiece and that she is backed by a lobby and very much trying to bring legislative change. And that's the heartbreak to me of, but at least she said it out loud, because so many people aren't willing to enter this conversation, and legislation will quietly sneak in if we aren't conscious of these things coming. I, before Brittany, didn't know we have 5 states with assisted suicide, and it's heartbreaking to me. And so, I feel like as the Lord gives me time, I'm going to lend my words to this and my heart to the care of the least of these in our society, because it matters.
Sure. 5 states. I keep talking about Oregon because it's probably the most liberal, and you have a much lower threshold, but you're right, there are some other states we can talk about. Let's take another phone call real quickly. If we can, we'll go to Missouri. Jonathan, what's your question for us today?
Hello?
Yes, you're on the air.
Yes, my name is Jonathan, and I was listening, and I just wanted to comment on that. I'm an outreach minister for a church, and biblically speaking, I really want to strongly advise, please don't take this action, because my question is this: how do we expect to get forgiveness if we say, "God, forgive me for me taking my life," and then we go ahead and commit the murder or the taking of life? Then how do we expect to receive forgiveness for that before that? Because we're asking Him to say, "Lord, forgive me for committing this murder," and then we commit to murder. How do we expect to receive forgiveness for that? I'm just really troubled me when I heard this. I just, my goodness, I know that we suffer and we go through things, but man, I don't think that we as people have the right to take life.
Sure. And again, I don't know the spiritual condition of Brittany Maynard, although I suspect she may not be a believer, but I don't know that, and it's not my judgment to make that. But if an individual has accepted Jesus Christ as Savior and Lord, I believe that they have, and the Bible very clearly teaches they have eternal life. And the other day when I was speaking to a group, I had some people say, well, what about, at that time we were, of course, talking about someone else had committed suicide, but it comes up all the time. And if it's Robin Williams, or whether it's going to be, in this case, Brittany Maynard, if you have accepted Christ and you have eternal life, how long is eternal? Well, eternity. And that every religion has said that killing yourself, suicide, is self-murder. So certainly every major religion, whether it's Christianity, whether it's Buddhism, Hinduism, Islam, certainly speak against it. But on the other hand, the issue is not taking the life. The issue is your stand before the Lord and whether or not your sins are forgiven. And that's an important question to ask, too.
That's right. And in my letter, I asked Brittany that. I said, if you even do this, consider who Jesus is. And that is probably the heart of my question for all of us. Who is this Jesus? How do we take Him seriously? What did His life, death, and resurrection mean in my life today? And for me, my union with Christ is today, and it will walk with me through the veil into death. And so those who have repented and accepted Him as Savior get to walk with Christ through death. But I think the point is valid in asking doctors to partner in people in dying.
Wow.
It's an unfair.
Yes.
It is an unfair thing to ask of doctors, and it's why we need to speak out on behalf of the medical community, because it goes against belief, it goes against the Hippocratic Oath. But I agree with you that knowing Christ is what protects our salvation.
Certainly.
Nothing more, nothing less.
Kara, appreciate you being with us today. We'd love to maybe follow your journey, and I would encourage people to go to mundanefaithfulness.com, or also, of course, we have the book, The Hardest Piece, and of course, we've also posted this wonderful letter to Brittany Maynard. So thank you for joining us today here on Point of View.
Thanks for having me.
Going to take a break. We'll talk about some very important issues in the second hour, but we have a message or two for you just before we take a break.
You go to a drive-thru today, and what do you have there? A dollar menu. And what do you get for that dollar? Well, in most cases, probably better not to think about it too much. But I want to encourage you, think about adding something to your dollar menu. Point of View Radio. Now, what I mean is this program doesn't have major corporate sponsorship, and we certainly don't have access, nor would we want it, to taxpayer money like PBS. Here are two ways that you can partner with us. Give $1 a day, or underwrite your very own minute of the program. How cool would that be? We figured it out. It costs about $65 for every minute that we're on the air. So for $65, you can bring the world a minute of Point of View. Pick your favorite minute each month, and you can call that one yours. The biggest thing, do something today. $1 a day, $30, or minute a month, $65. Give online. Hit the partner button at pointofview.net. Call 1-800-227-1444 or write Point of View, Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221. Point of View will continue after this.
I just thank God for y'all. I listen to you every day, truly. I wanted to thank y'all for everything you do each day to inform Christian families and our community about the things we can do, and just the way you're so informative. I listen to you daily and love you guys and appreciate you so much.
God bless you, Kerby, for keeping this show so on track and for the decades of wonderful help to this nation that Point of View has been. We're all big fans of your work, and we pray that God will just prosper it.
As a Christian, over the years that I've followed this program, I'm constantly challenged to be on guard and to evaluate what's going on. And if for no other reason, to protect the caliber and the truth of your programming, I need to participate and to back your program financially to ensure that the truth stays out there for people to hear, to view, and to be a part of.
This is Point of View Radio.
Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Second hour today, we're going to spend some time talking about parenting. I think you're really going to enjoy the conversation. 12 huge mistakes parents can avoid leading your kids to success in life, and it is written by Tim Elmore. He was on the program with us just not so long ago when we talked about his book, Artificial Maturity, Helping Kids Meet the Challenge of Becoming Authentic Adults, a book that had been recommended to me. And this new book is published by Harvest House. We have information about it on our website, and we certainly do encourage you to find out a little bit more. Dr. Tim Elmore is the president of Growing Leaders, which is an Atlanta-based organization that provides information and resources for about 7,000 public schools, universities, civic organizations, and corporations that really are to foster the growth of young leaders. And Dr. Tim Elmore, thank you for joining us once again here on Point of View.
Kerby, it's great to be with you. Thanks for having me on again.
Now, one of the things that sort of runs through this book is what we oftentimes have called helicopter parents or snowplow parents plowing the way, but you call them over-functioning parents. But the reality is, whatever phrase, and I like your positive one, maybe a little more positive, these are functioning parents, but they're rather over-functioning. They protect their children from the consequences of their actions. And we can certainly go through all 12 of those, but the one kind of summary theme is sometimes parents get too involved in their kids' lives and prevent them from learning lessons that they are only going to learn by actually experiencing the successes and failures of life.
Absolutely. In fact, one of the things I try to teach in this book, Kerby, is that life is full of equations. You and I both know that. We've learned that probably the hard way, that if you do this, there's a benefit. If you do that, there's a consequence. And when we rush in and take that backpack to our children or run over and, negotiate the grade with the teacher or whatever, we're actually removing the realities of life that they're going to have to face one day. And I say it's far better to help them face it when the stakes are low and they're 9 years old or 10 years old than when they're 30 years old and they're still learning these hard lessons.
One of the other interesting, before we get into some of the specifics, one of the interesting points in your book is what I call the Lake Wobegon effect. We've talked about this before. If you survey Americans, they say the public school system isn't doing very well. But the school my child is in is doing very well. And if you, as we talked about with George Barna, if you survey pastors, they say, the state of the American church isn't very good, but I think our church is doing pretty well. You have the same kind of thing here. When parents were asked to grade themselves on their parenting skills, they gave themselves an A or a B. But when they tried to evaluate the parenting skills of other parents in America, they gave them a D. That says a lot, doesn't it?
It sure does. But if you stop and think about it, this almost makes sense, doesn't it? We judge ourselves with our hearts. We go through a bad day. We didn't do a good job with our kids, but we say, well, you don't know the kind of hard day I had, and we go on and on and on. But when we look outward, we think, well, gosh, they should control that child over there, and so we don't do a very objective job, I think, with evaluating. And the truth is, I think in many cases we are living out our unlived life through our child. So much of it reflects on us. We want it to look good in our own home because this is our own report card, how our kids turn out.
Sure. And just before we get into specifics, one other one I thought I'd put on the table, which you and I have talked about before, the millennial generation growing up with a very different world. You refer to it as a generation of first. First of all, they have an amount of computing capability in their cell phones that's unimaginable in previous generations. And it's a camera, it's a watch, it's a calendar, it's a board game, it's all the kinds of things that it is. And that itself, I think, poses a few extra problems or challenges, at least, for parents trying to raise this generation.
Absolutely. In fact, the way I summarize this, Kerby, is this. 40 years ago, when my parents were raising me, some of life's lessons just hit you, and they couldn't prevent it. You know, you had to wait on things because everybody was waiting on things. Today, I think we have to be way more intentional as parents because culture just seeps in, and that cell phone that, by the way, is online all the time. Now we're first of all, their innocence is removed far earlier at 8 or 9 years old, and then they're having to navigate stuff that they probably shouldn't have to navigate until they're 16, 17, 18 years old. So there's an intentionality we've got to be about because they are inaugurating so many firsts, and we don't have a manual on how to help them through this. We've got to learn it as we go.
Well, again, excellent book, and it's over 200 pages, Harvest House, 12 huge mistakes parents can avoid leading your kids to succeed in life. We have information about it on our website. Of course, we have links to the organization Growing Leaders, and, of course, we have a little bit of a summary of this book there as well. So lots of resources, but let's take one of the mistakes. We won't let them fail. Again, this is almost a theme that runs throughout the book, but in that chapter, you're talking about the fact that sometimes failure is a good thing. I can think of books that have been out in the past, Failure, the Back Door to Success, and how we can learn so many very important life lessons by failing. But if we never let our children fail, and everybody in the soccer team gets a trophy, and everybody's a winner, we're not necessarily setting them up for success in the future, are we?
No, we aren't. And really the best way I can summarize this one, Kerby, is to say, I think we're thinking about today and their own happiness and their own satisfaction today. And, of course, giving them a trophy despite the score, it makes them happy today, but it does not get them ready for the future. So I often say, more than once in this book, I say, the further out I can see into the future, the better the decision I make for my kids today. And not letting them fail, sure, that makes them happier today, but boy, it just doesn't set them up. And I suggest in that chapter, when there's no possibility of failure, it just dilutes the motivation to excel. Pretty soon they go, I don't have to try hard. I'm going to get the same trophy, whether I win or lose or fail or whatever. And that's not a good thing when we turn out a young employee into the workforce.
Just before we open up the phones and I get one of those phone calls, let's put in our disclaimer, and that is you say we must create a safe place to fail. Dr. Tim Elmore and Kerby Anderson are not suggesting that we allow them to crawl out on a limb over a cliff, over the deep blue ocean, but there are some places where failure cannot have devastating or repercussions, but at the same time, we can't just continually protect them from failure because we'll never allow them to succeed either.
Yeah. Well, quite frankly, anybody I talk to that I ask about their own journey, they always note how failure played a role as a teacher in their own journey. So we all admit that. We just hate to watch our own children go through it themselves. But if we really love our kids, and I want to reiterate, if we really love our kids, you're absolutely right. It's not reckless failure, but it's calculated failure where we walk them through it, we navigate it, we pray with them, we cry with them, but they see that you can come out on the other end even better.
Again, an excellent book, and I think you're really going to enjoy this based on the growingleaders.com blog post, and you certainly can find more information there. We have a link to Growing Leaders. We have information about the book. It is published by Harvest House. You probably can find it in your local bookstore, but as always, we have it in our Point of View store in case you'd like to get a copy. Some incredibly kind comments and endorsements from people like John Maxwell and Andy Stanley and all sorts of other people. So again, I think you're going to enjoy the book. We've only worked our way through one. We'll see if we can get through all 12, and if not, that's fine too. But we're going to spend some time talking about some of the mistakes parents could make and they need to avoid if they're going to really be successful in raising children that are godly and successful in the 21st century. We'll talk about that with him and then open up the phones and talk with you right after these messages.
The Point of View Commentary with Kerby Anderson.
As we're getting closer to the open enrollment period for Obamacare, it might be good to go back and evaluate the claims made during the debate on the Affordable Care Act. We were told that the costs would go down, competition would increase, millions would enroll, and policies wouldn't be canceled. Robert Moffat, writing in the Daily Signal, says that healthcare costs have increased significantly. Huge increases in deductibles and policies sold through the exchanges were a big story in Florida, Illinois, and elsewhere. The promise made during the congressional debate was that premium costs would drop by $2,500. They increased dramatically and even doubled for many Americans, especially of younger age. Robert Moffat also explains that the law actually reduced competition in many health insurance markets. A limited analysis of the Kaiser Family Foundation found that in 2014, large states like California and New York were more competitive, but Connecticut and Washington were less competitive. Another study found that on the county level, more than half had just one or two health insurance carriers. The Obama administration claims that over 8 million people enrolled in the health insurance exchanges, but we should remember that exchange enrollment is not the same as insurance coverage, and there are 700,000 fewer persons in the exchanges than previously thought. Americans were also promised that Obamacare would stop health insurers from canceling policies. Merrill Matthews, writing in Forbes, reminds us that more health insurance policies have been canceled under Obamacare than ever before. He goes on to explain that more cancellations are on the way. The president twice postponed the deadline to have Obamacare qualified coverage in the small group and individual markets, but only if states wanted to extend the deadline. Some did and some did not. More cancellations are coming, but the notices will emerge in drips and drabs and likely won't get as many headlines. I think it's safe to say that Obamacare hasn't lived up to any of the promises made when the bill was being debated. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Dr. Tim Elmore with us. If you'd like to join our conversation, calls already coming in, 1-800-351-1212. We'll get to some of those in just a minute. Talking about 12 huge mistakes parents can avoid. And one of the others I wanted to put on the table, which you've already sort of alluded to, we project our lives on them. We've already sort of talked about that, but you open that chapter by talking about looking and watching a Little League baseball game. And whether it's a baseball game or whether it's Pop Warner football or whether it is a soccer game, we all know these unruly parents and coaches that seem to be trying to live out their lives vicariously through those young kids out there on the field.
Absolutely. We've all seen this. We've all giggled at it, and I don't know whether now it's better to laugh or cry, but very, very often it's the adult that becomes the trouble spot in children's sports, and it's because it just means so much to us. We're thinking that maybe this is going to somehow, get a scout to watch my son play football or whatever, and so we go bonkers. In that story, if you remember, Kerby, I talk about this dad that just absolutely takes it out on his son who strikes out. And the kid's like 8 or 9 years old. And I'm thinking, this poor kid is having this traumatic experience. And he's probably a computer programmer, a future computer software programmer. He's not going to play third base for the Boston Red Sox. And the dad's messaging by getting so angry with him is purely that if you fail, don't come talking to me. You're not going to get any mercy from me. You've got to perform and make the grade, make the team, make the money. I can only imagine the kind of counseling he's going to need as an adult. But it's us and it's our baggage that often leads to unhealthy young adults that we've given birth to and raised in the end.
In that chapter, you do talk a little bit about why that happens. And I think it might be worth for a moment parents to say, maybe I'm trying to figure out why I do it or why my spouse does this. What is it that brings this about in the first place?
Well, it's a few things. One is the obvious. Sometimes we wanted to play football or baseball or whatever, and we didn't get to do it. Somehow that didn't work out for us. And so we've got this chance to do it over again through my daughter, my son. And it could be piano, it could be soccer, it could be anything. But we now have created such a culture where we celebrate and post Instagram photos of everything that happens that's good, that we're consumed with this appearance. So part of it is, I think, we're projecting our kids because we have these issues ourselves. We're not completely healthy ourselves. Maybe we have our own childhood issues we never grew up past. And I don't claim to get into psychology in this chapter. I just say we've got to evaluate our own emotional health if we ever have any hope of having healthy kids and our kids growing into healthy adults.
Tim Elmore with us. If you'd like to join our conversation today, 1-800-351-1212. Let's go out to Georgia on the Good News Network. Jacqueline, you're on with Tim Elmore.
Good afternoon, and thank you for taking my call. Listening to the conversation prior to the break about parents who will, not really let their kids fail. Boy, that kind of was a gut punch for me, I'm afraid. One of the things that I have tried to do to make myself feel better about this, and I'm sure you'll probably tell me why I'm should not be feeling better about it, is I've always said, well, if I'm the one who causes my child to leave something in school, I'm rushing everybody out the door, it's a crazy morning, and everything was due to me just kind of maybe having a not such a good mom moment. And we get rushed out the door, and the next thing I know, we drop up at school, everyone's left their lunches, things like that. I've always said, well, if I'm the one that caused it, then I will go back and I'll get it and I'll make those runs and I'll take things back. And then I'll say, but if you're the one that it's your responsibility, and if you leave things, if you leave that book bag at the house, that's your responsibility. I'm sorry. And yet that phone call eventually comes, and my poor child is saying, Mother, please, I'm going to get a 0. I'm scared to death. I can't not turn this homework in or this assignment in, and it's in the bag. And I just feel compelled, I don't know why. I guess because maybe in the same sense you were talking even about the sports, it's like, it's like I'm back at school. I don't want to fail. I don't want my kids to fail. And the next thing I know, I'm back in the truck and I've got the bag and I'm heading across town back to school. So,
sure. And I guess the question I've got is maybe, do you get a chance to get a get out of jail free card every once in a while? In other words, everybody makes a mistake, but if it's perennial and it's chronic, that's a bigger issue, isn't it, Tim?
Sure. Absolutely. And by the way, I can tell you've got a great heart and you want to lead your kids well. There's nothing wrong with once in a while where you say, I think it was my fault. It was this is me that caused this, to take that backpack down. I think you're right, Kerby. When it's chronic, in other words, we see this is a pattern, and my child is just not getting this responsibility thing, then that's an issue. And then also, I think it's important that we read our kids as we lead our kids. If you see that one of your children is really getting the responsibility thing, and it's an exception, not a rule, there's nothing wrong with showing grace and mercy and helping out. My issue in this, and I think you fully get this, is am I about to produce a young adult that still wants to blame somebody else or get somebody else to swoop in and save the day when they aren't responsible? And, of course, none of us want to turn out young people that do that. So I tell the story in that chapter about Sharon and Brooke. Brooke was her daughter. She was 14, and she forgot to take a permission slip into school. And it was Brooke's fault. She forgot. Well, she called Mom and said, Mom, I'm going to have to run laps if I don't have this permission slip. And I love how Sharon responded. She said, sweetheart, I absolutely adore you. And I'm so sorry you forgot that. But she said, honey, I'm tied up right now. And, this is going to be good exercise, the laps, And, of course, that didn't go over too well. But Brooke ran the laps. And I tell you what, Brooke and she had a conversation right after. Brooke will never forget that again because it was a memorable experience that kind of drove it home. those experiences are far more memorable than talks or lectures. And so that's really what I'm after, is that kind of, life lesson.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. And I am a lecturer, and I tend to do that, I think, more than allow the experience. So I guess if I gave myself a grade, we're going with I have to at least pass a little bit. I'm going to give myself a C-. I won't.
I'm sure you're doing well.
I'm sure you're doing well.
I appreciate your encouragement. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, you bet.
And that gets back to something else. Sometimes these are teachable moments, and you know as well as I do,
Yeah.
and certainly have written more than 24 books on the subjects, that those teachable moments are more significant than any kind of lecture, and those opportunities to run laps or to fail or to recognize that you are going to have to take some money out of the allowance to pay for something you broke or whatever it might be, are things that are life lessons that young people really need to hear and to experience.
Absolutely. And in fact, another story I tell is I have a great friend, David, whose son, Nick, really wanted this brand new iPod that had just come out. And as you know, Apple products sell pretty fast, and so Nick was afraid it was going to sell out. So my friend David said, well, Nick, do you have the money now that we're at the Apple store to get this iPod? And he said, no, I don't. And he said, well, then you can't buy it. But he said, I'll make you a deal, Nick. He said, I do have the money. And so he said, I'll buy it, and I'll secure it for us. But I'm going to put it up on a top shelf in my closet, and you're going to make monthly payments to me. And once you have those payments done, you're going to enjoy this. So he secured it. He took away that we're not going to get it. But he had Nick learn the whole monthly payment thing. And he said, Tim, when Nick finally got that iPod, he was so grateful. And he had learned the life lesson of, I'm going to have to pay this off. So those kinds of things seem so small, but they're huge,
yes, they are.
Memorable lessons as our kids turn 18 and 19 years old.
When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about a couple of other mistakes, the idea of trying to prioritize being happy, and sometimes the way in which we're inconsistent. I've already sort of alluded to some of these that talk about the fact that we take away some of the consequences. I also want to get into the one about sometimes we tend to praise the wrong things, and much, much more. I think you're really going to enjoy the book. It is well written, and it breaks into very easy to read, manageable chapters, 12 huge mistakes parents actually can avoid, based upon the growingleaders.com blog post, and we have a link to growingleaders.com. We also have information about this book. We have a way for you to order it. Of course, you can also get it from Tim Elmore, or, of course, since it is published by Harvest House, probably in your local bookstore. So if you have a bookstore nearby, we certainly commend that to you. Take a time to look up all the information that we have made available today. All 3 books that we've talked about are available on our website. The election resources are up there as well. In less than 2 weeks, we have a very important election, and early voting has already begun. So there's an opportunity for you to get some of that information. We have posted a couple of videos for you to watch, and we encourage you that after watching them, maybe to click on that share button, and then take the opportunity then to pass that on to other individuals. You can find all of it at the website, pointofview.net. And of course, you can give us a call, 1-800-351-1212. We have a special message for you, and then we'll be right back.
A partner is someone who joins others to accomplish a task. In business, it usually means you share the risk and the profits. In ministry, it often means the same thing. Now, what do you risk when you partner with Point of View? After more than 40 years on the air, you pretty much know what you're going to get. Our president, Warren Kelly, has been with us for more than 25 years. Kerby Anderson, more than 30. That's a level of faithfulness and consistency that you don't find too many places. But what about shared profits? Well, in Matthew 10, Jesus says, giving a cup of cold water brings reward. And as a Point of View partner, you share in every life touched, every life equipped. Give generously. Now, it could be $1 a day, $30 a month, or $65 a month, which pays for 1 minute of our on-air ministry. Invest in the partnership with eternal value. Give by phone, 1-800-227-1444. Online, click the partner button at pointofview.net, or drop a gift by mail, Point of View Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221. $30 a month or $65. Start today. Point of View will continue after this.
are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
12 huge mistakes that actually parents can avoid in raising their children. If you'd like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. Dr. Tim Elmore with us. Let's take another phone call, and we'll get back into the book. Gwinnera in Georgia, thank you for calling today. What's your question?
Thank you for having me. I've only been tuned in for a little bit, but I listen to you. I just picked my daughter up from school. She's 10. And I think that my question is relevant to the topic, just the difficulties that parents have raising children who to turn out to be responsible adults. And one of the things that I have a hard time wrapping my mind around is how to allow a child and teach them that responsibility of managing money properly. And also, the second part of my question is, I have a hard time trying to know what discipline is appropriate for what action to help her, become responsible and understand and respectful and compassionate and all those things that we need to be.
Sure. And it wasn't a great phone connection, but I think you got those. Number one, money management. Number two, discipline. What are your thoughts?
Well, the good news is I think I can at least throw you a little bit of a nugget here that might be good to think about and maybe act on. And it might answer both questions in one. It seems to me like we turn out healthy young people when we always balance two ingredients in their life, autonomy and responsibility. In other words, those two equal but opposite doses need to be given at any stage of their journey. So at 5 years old, they get 5-year-old autonomy, which is just a little bit, but then 5-year-old responsibility, just a little bit. At 16, 16-year-old responsibility, 16-year-old autonomy. When my son got his driver's license, he didn't get a car right away. We were saving up, and we went in together on that. So he had to borrow the family car for a little while if he wanted to go out with his friends on Friday night. So if Jonathan said to me, hey, Dad, can I borrow the car keys? I want to go out with my friends. If I threw him the car keys, I was obviously giving him a little bit of autonomy, right? So what I would say, Jonathan, fill up the tank with gas. Now, if he would go bonkers and go, oh, my gosh, fill up the tank with gas, I would say, or you can make a car payment, either one, But my point was he knew that, in fact, I even talked to him. I believe by the time our kids reach 12 or 13 years old, we should talk to them about our leadership and the reasons behind our decisions. He knew that I would create a brat if he kept getting lots and lots and lots of autonomy with no responsibility.
Good point.
I don't think America needs any more brats. We have plenty. What we need is kids that enjoy the perks that come with I'm on my own and I get to do it by myself, but I always know there's a price tag to the perk. So I think those are decisions that you have to think through, maybe talk over with a spouse or a friend. But if it's money management, you might want to say at the beginning of the school year, sweetheart, you get $100 or $200 or whatever it is. Now, you need to think this through, and you need to get your underwear and your blouses and your skirt or whatever, And I had a friend that did this and showed it to me. It was brilliant. He said one year his daughter got a really nice coat. She didn't get any new shirts for one whole year, but she learned along the way. I've got to pace myself, and I've got to spread this out. And she learned both life and money management at the same time. So maybe those will be at least sparks to an idea that you can enjoy.
And for a 10-year-old, or maybe even let's make it younger, a 6-year-old, sometimes I find that envelopes help. You have one envelope, and this is your tithe to the church, and here is one for this or that. You're going to put some money in savings, and you're already, in a sense, creating a situation where it is very easy if you give them, instead of a $100 bill, of course you wouldn't be giving that much, but let's say a $50, you give them a lot of ones, and then they put some in each envelope. Then they begin to see that and get a passbook and begin to understand the importance of savings and some other things. Those are very important lessons, Tim Elmore, because we have a consumerist society, and if they don't understand and really use those principles when they're young, they're going to be the ones that when they go off to college and they say, oh, they're going to give me a credit card, they're going to be the one to get the credit card, max them out, and then go into debt.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so glad you brought that up. That's what we did with our children, those just dividing them up into savings, giving, spending, and it was so helpful. You know what it was? It was the lesson of delayed gratification.
That's right.
You wait on what you really want because it goes in some other pockets or envelopes. So it's very wise.
Delayed gratification leads me to one of the chapters there. We prioritize being happy. How many times, Tim Elmore, we have heard parents say, well, I just want my kids to be happy. That's a nice goal, but it better not be your ultimate goal, or you're really going to have problems with your children later on.
Absolutely. This is very counterintuitive, but let me talk for just a minute about this. Who doesn't want their kids to be happy? You just said that, Kerby. That's so true. But I'll tell you, to the person, everybody has children that have a pretty high level of misery. They're miserable. And it's because they've made that a goal rather than a byproduct. If I just long for happiness, it's a boy I want or a girl. It's a new iPhone. It's this or that. It's always going to be elusive. And I try to contend in this chapter that when happiness is a goal instead of a byproduct, it's just going to be disappointing. We lead to disillusioned young adults. Instead, if we say we're going to really focus in on identifying our primary God-given gifts and then finding ways to serve up those gifts to the community around us. Maybe it's a short-term mission trip. Maybe it's working in the soup kitchen for a night. But we're serving. I have found, and this is biblical, if we serve our gifts up to people, happiness always follows it. But it's a... You follow that?
Sure.
And if I give them the illusion that life is about happiness and it's just about pleasure and goosebumps and all this other stuff, boy, am I going to create a miserable adult. So again, I've got to look out into the future, give them no illusions right now, but speak the truth in love. Boy, I'm going to have a very fulfilled and satisfied adult that knows how to marry well and serve on a job. And boy, that's what I want to turn out as a generation of kids that know how to do that.
One of your other mistakes is don't lie about their potential. We lie about their potential, I should say, and don't explore their true potential. It reminds me a little bit of the advice that Mike Rowe got himself in trouble for. You might remember him from Dirty Jobs because he's made the case that you shouldn't always follow your passion. So let's put Mike Rowe and Tim Elmore together for just a minute and kind of think through what that might mean.
Well, I'll try to compliment what he has said. I feel like that nobody ever intends to lie to their children, obviously. In fact, that even almost probably seems offensive to look at that chapter title. But here's how we lie, and here's why we do it. We see our child do something even average, and we say, "Oh, that was awesome."
Oh, wasn't?
First of all, the word awesome is way overused.
Well, let's just ban that word for a year. How about that?
Exactly.
I'm all for it.
God is awesome. Yeah, none of us.
Nothing else is. Yeah, right.
So I think we need to, first of all, make sure our comments, our affirmation, and our praise matches what they've done. But then secondly, if they want to be, let's just say, I'm going to go on the edge here, and be the next American Idol, if they're not good singers, don't set them up to think they can be the next American Idol. That's as we watch this poor kid singing, who are your friends? Who has not been truthful with you to tell you should maybe dance or work computers, but you can't sing.
Yeah.
So all that to say, I think we lie unwittingly when we misrepresent where their gifts really lie, and then we fail to explore their true potential. Maybe it's not going to be a glitzy, glamorous job like becoming a star in Hollywood, alluded to earlier, or a tremendous teacher. What a great place to invest. Or a nurse or a missionary. Incredible jobs, perhaps underpaid, but boy, are there jewels in the crown, later when they have done the very things they've been called to do and gifted to do.
And in that chapter, you talk about passion, but you also talk about another P, perseverance. And you talk about the Google reflex. I love that. They quit when things don't work quickly. This is a generation that expects immediate gratification. When I go on the computer, I expect to find the information. I expect that if I don't have an answer for something, I will Google it. And that's probably one of the biggest challenges I think parents are going to face with children in the 21st century.
Absolutely. And if you have a child that's in that world and has a strong personality, they wear you out. You just give in and give them whatever they're looking for, which doesn't help them. if I can take just a second, let me try to give a handle on this very issue. In this book, 12 Huge Mistakes, I talk about the word scene. I talk about the culture, the scene that we're in today, and I take the word scene, S-C-E-N-E, and I say it aptly describes the world that our kids are growing up in. The letter S reminds me they're growing up in a world of speed. But if I grow up in a world of speed, I can think that slow is bad. The letter C, they're growing up in a world of convenience.
Let me jump in real quickly because I want to get the whole scene in there, but we have one of those mandatory breaks, so we'll come back. And then we also have some more phone calls. We'll get to that right after this.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back for a few more minutes. Tim Elmore with us, and get out your pens because we're going to talk about scene. But again, S stands for speed, and I had to interrupt you, so finish it off.
No worries. I've simply taken the word scene, S-C-E-N-E. The word speed, letter S stands for speed. And if I grew up in a world of speed, I can tend to think that slow is bad. The letter C reminds me they're growing up in a world of convenience. And if I grew up in that world, I tend to think that hard is bad. The letter E is I grew up in a world of entertainment. Entertainment's on our phones right now, all the time, 24/7. If I grew up in a world of entertainment, I can think that boring is bad. The letter N, they're often, not all the time, but often grow up in a world of nurture, of safety belts and helmets, and everybody gets a trophy. And if I grew up in a world of nurture, then risk is bad. And by the way, Kerby, this is the most risk-averse generation of young adults to date. And it's because we created such a safety first thing, which is good, but now they don't want to take any risk at all. And I don't think that's what our country was built on. That's not what we need to be doing as Christ followers. And then the last letter, E and C, many of them, not all, but many, have grown up in a world of entitlement. And if I grow up in a world of entitlement, I think that labor is bad. I deserve this just for being here. And my point in saying this is those outcomes, those unintended consequences of slow is bad, hard is bad, those are the very things that build virtues in me.
Right.
I mean, that's what makes me a good man, a good leader, a good husband, a good father. And so our culture, thanks to its speed and convenience, is unwittingly taking away those amazing virtues that we would build naturally 40 or 50 years ago. That's, again, why moms and dads, we've got to be way more intentional now about building these things in our kids, because it may not happen naturally through just living life.
Let's see if we can take another phone call. Jenny in Florida, thank you for calling today. You're on with Tim Elmore.
Hi, this is Jeannie from Florida. I'm raising a grandchild, and he's fixing to be 15. I was speaking about what you consider monthly allowance would be so that he can learn some responsibility. He's a really good kid. He makes really good grades, but he's got an iPhone, and he stays on it all the time. He wants the best of clothes, the best shoes, and pretty much I give it to him.
And that kind of is mistake number 8. We give them what they should earn. So I think I know what you're going to say, but you have the floor.
Well, I'll try to make this brief, and this is just my thoughts. It may not be the best thought or the only thought certainly out there. There is some controversy on whether allowance is right or wrong. Some people think, you should get allowance just for being a part of the family. I actually think, and we did this in our home, that allowance can be a good thing to begin to get them used to. We all participate in family chores, things that need to be done around the house. We gave them age-appropriate chores, starting at 4 years old, and then we would remunerate them accordingly. So let's say taking out the trash was, every week was $5 or $3. It kind of depended on how old Jonathan was in our house. And then, making his bed or this or that. I think it would be wise for you to make a list of all the expectations you would have if he were really doing the responsible thing around the house. And then perhaps you could even attach, here's your allowance for doing these items. The plus about this is it gets him used to the kind of world he's going to have as an adult when he works a job. It also then calls you or challenges you to say, if he didn't do it, the allowance isn't an automatic thing. And I believe that's important to communicate, that if you don't come through, it's going to be reflected in the income or the revenue you're generating, and that. And so the allowance isn't coming. So I'm hoping that makes sense and at least kind of guides you in thinking through, what it would be. And obviously a teenager, I think your question was how much. A teenager should probably make, obviously more than they did at 8 years old or 9 years old. I think the older they are, they can handle a little bit more money. But then you would expect more. Remember, there's autonomy and responsibility that always go together.
Very good. Just before I go, I did want to at least get one more, and that is we praise the wrong things. There is a tendency for us to praise how they look, how smart they are. No reason why we shouldn't, but we certainly should praise them for their virtues and their values. True?
Yeah. Absolutely. In fact, all this was based on research. Every one of these mistakes I dug and I found research. Very quickly, Carol Dweck is the one that gives us insight on that. She's a Stanford University professor who began to hear, she discovered that 85% of parents in America believe it's important to say to your child, you're smart. And the reason we believe that is because we think that's going to give them a little bit of an encouragement or a little bit of a hope or a little angel on their shoulder, when they take the next test. She had a suspicion that it was going to backfire. And quite frankly, here's what she discovered. When she divided up two groups of 10-year-old kids and gave them both a fifth grade level test, she discovered that the group that was told, wow, you must be smart afterwards, and the group that was told, wow, you must have really tried hard, had very different second round of tests and third round of tests. Bottom line is she tells us we need to praise variables that are in their control. Smartness is not under their control. Beauty is not really in their control. Nothing wrong with saying that from time to time, but she said, we need to be saying, I love the strategy you used on that math problem.
Yes.
I loved how hard you worked. I love how honest you are. And I know that sounds old-fashioned, but boy, does that, what gets rewarded gets repeated. And I think that's what we got to be doing when we praise our kids, is praising the things that are in their control and the things we want to grow.
I love one of it. Of the students praised for their effort, 90% chose the harder test. Of those praised for their intelligence, the vast majority chose the easy test. So again, the smart kids took the cop-out. Is that the kind of kid you want in the future? Of course not. It's just,
in fact,
go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, Kerby, real quick, the smart kids started saying, well, if I'm so smart, I shouldn't have to try so hard.
Yeah.
That's the natural conclusion. So we don't want that in the end.
It's just such an outstanding book. I do love all of your books anyway. We've talked in the past about Artificial Maturity, which is a book I certainly do still commend to our listeners. But this new book, published by Harvest House, paperback book, over 200 pages, about 230 pages, and 12 different mistakes parents can avoid. And as you pointed out, just in passing there, let me come back to it again. A lot of this is not just the intuitive perspective of Dr. Tim Elmore. It comes from a lot of very important research. And of course, most of us, as we've heard some of this, say, yeah, I probably do that sometimes, or, I've seen other parents do that. I hope I don't make that mistake. So it's just a great book. And as always, you've written it in such an engaging style. And I encourage people to find out a little bit more about you by going to growingleaders.com, to go to the blog, and to get all the great material that you have available there.
Kerby, thanks. Great to be with you again.
Great to have you with us. That's all we have for today, and I hope that you will take the time to follow all of the resources that we have put together. We have 3 different books. Not always do we talk about so many books, but we thought all 3 of them certainly relate to various issues that we've talked about over the last 2 hours. We have a video for you to watch, as well as one of our new videos in the Uncensored series, so we encourage you to watch that. Click that share button, and that gives you an opportunity then to maybe share that with others. And most importantly, in addition to the articles and the web links, let me mention again, we're just 2 weeks away from an election. Some of you may have even voted today. I've already voted, early voting, and so I make it real easy for myself. So if you are in the process of deciding who you will vote for, you may know who you're going to vote for if you have a senatorial race or a congressional race. You may not know who some of the people further down the ballot are. Some of these voter guides will give you information. If not, you can maybe even contact some of those local family policy groups. They might have some recommendations. And so we encourage you to vote and to vote intelligently. And that's why we have those election resources there. Each day we post some new material. So even if you visited it, go back and see what else we've posted there that might be helpful to you so that you can make wise decisions about this election. I want to thank Andrew and Catherine and Chris for the help behind the scenes. Louis Gomer with us tomorrow, and Jim Cymbala. It's going to be a great day. We'll see you back here tomorrow.
Over the past 25 years, I have met many of the voices in Christian radio. Bob Lepine, John Fuller, Carl Miller, Mark Larson, Dave Spiker. Now, you may not know the names, but I assure you, you have heard their voices. Let me tell you, if these men or I never had to ask for financial help again, we would be thrilled. But, you know, when I think about it, that's true, and it's not true. I recently gave a Bible to someone, and they gave it to a person from India. And through reading that Bible, that person came to Jesus Christ. Now, I didn't directly give her the Bible, but by giving, I shared in what God was doing. Now, I believe that one day you'll hear stories of how God used your sacrifice in supporting Point of View. Today, please consider a single gift of $30, $75, maybe $500. Call us at 1-800-227-1444. Click the donate button at pointofview.net or send your gift by mail. Point of View, Box 30, Dallas, Texas, 75221. 30, 75, 500. Thank you for giving. Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.